Hey everybody out there, it's Pastor John with your Midweek Reflection. Today is Epiphany, which means it's the last hurrah for this guy behind me. It's the end of Christmas tide, the 12 days of Christmas. Epiphany, which we're going to observe on Sunday, is inspired by the journey of the Magi from the east to meet the Christ child and give him their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And to start off, you might be asking, why do I call them Magi? Well, one, they're not kings. They weren't really royalty in any particular country. They weren't leaders there, as far as we know. And two, wise men, I think, sometimes blocks us from really getting at what Matthew is telling us in this story. You see, the Magi were really pagan astrologers. Okay, so you might even say that according to Jews at the time, they would have been regarded as fools. They were people who looked at the stars to get their spiritual guidance. They didn't believe in the God of Israel. Okay, so wise men, it turns out that they're wise, right? But they would not have been classified as such by any Jew in that world at that time. And that's part of the point, that God actually reaches out to these pagan astrologers and guides them through their astrology even, which we'll talk about on Sunday, to this encounter with Christ. And so Magi, I think, is the best word. Pagan astrologers doesn't have a ring to it. We three pagan astrologers of the East are, it doesn't make for a good lyric. And so I think Magi is the closest to the original Greek, and that's what it's about. Anyway, one of the questions I was pondering this week as I looked at our text for Epiphany is, really the story is 12 verses. And why has this story captivated us so much? The Magi are staples on our mantles and wherever we have nativity sets. There are legends about them and names given to them and all kinds of lore surrounding the Magi, and they've just become this really big part of our Christmas celebration. And whether or not they were there at the birth, which they weren't, most likely, is neither here nor there. They are associated with that story, but it's only 12 verses. So what is it that draws us to the Magi and their journey? And really that's a clue to why I think we're drawn to it, is their journey. One of the things we've talked about before is that we read the Bible historically, right? So, I believe that, the birth of Jesus and Jesus himself, the resurrection, a lot of these things are historical events. Not all of them necessarily, but a lot of them are. And we read them as historical events, but that's not why they're there. They're not just there for the history. They're there because in some way they connect with us. In some ways they represent our own spirituality, our own faith, our own human longings and desires and tendencies and sins and joys and all of these things. We find those in these stories. That's what makes them so powerful. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that on Sunday. But until then, take some time and look at the story of the Magi, those 12 verses, and what is it about that story that connects or maybe resonates with your journey and your faith and your experience of Christ. As always, I look forward to living the gospel or glorifying. I look forward to worshiping with you as we live the gospel life together. Until then, may God bless you.